Securing the COVID-19 vaccine supply chain is the topic of my discussion today with Stacy Scott. She is Managing Director of Cyber Risk Practice at Kroll. Hello, Stacy.
Hi, Robert. How are you?
Good. Thanks for being with me today. Now, what are your biggest concerns about both cyber risk and physical security as they relate to COVID-19 vaccine distribution?
I think it's, obviously we live in a digital world, and it's just how many different technologies we're using in the distribution of these vaccines and creating them, getting them to the end, healthcare worker that's going to, give them to all Americans and people worldwide, but then tracking afterwards as well. And how are we monitoring, the movement of those vaccines through? How are we keeping them cold when necessary, or in the right, whatever, safe, so that they're not, there's not any disruption to, or integrity isn't ruined of their whatever they contain. So I think that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Things that I'm concerned about. So the technology used to monitor, the technology used to secure, are those things, do they have vulnerabilities? Can you patch them? And those types of things are my biggest concerns.
And we had to ramp up so quickly. Once the vaccine was ready to go, boy, we had to, we've been putting out millions and millions of these things on a regular basis. Was the system ready in terms of being secure? Did it draw on previous technologies and previous experiences with other pandemics, or have there been problems of playing catch up with security of the system because of the fast ramp up that was required?
I'd say absolutely. I think it's not that the capability wasn't there. It's just the ramp up needed to be so quick that sometimes it's easy to, miss something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to double check and to make sure you have all these things. And the mass scale of it, I think, is the thing to think about. The mass scale so quickly. Also, there's just, there's the capability for error there, right? There's the likelihood of it there, which is the big deal there. So it's not that the capability didn't exist. It's just setting it up so quickly on such a big scale becomes more difficult, in general. I do think there's certain technologies that have less capabilities, and we're now finding those, especially when you have to set up in such a great need, right? It's always worse in an emergency situation to find out, ooh, that doesn't work as well as we had expected it to, or that's a risk we didn't even see coming. So there are some surprises, but I think generally we had the capability. It's just the scale and the speed of it makes it easy to be missed.
So when it comes to cyber risk specifically, where and from whom might we expect to see the biggest threats?
I really think it's from nation states really trying to get the information, be the first to market, understand how we're distributing things, understanding, how, what, what our deals are with different suppliers and different logistics companies to see if they can offer a better deal, whatever the case may be, to get that intelligence so that they can be faster and better at doing these types of things for economic gain is really what I see.
But from a national perspective, we're not talking about individuals who are looking to make a quick killing,
Right.
profit from hacking into the system and
Absolutely.
somehow, taking advantage of it in that way.
Right. I
Or
see it from a
doing,
national level.
yeah, or ransomware. Is that a threat at this point, simply to disrupt the supply chain? Have we seen any such instances of that?
We absolutely have, and that's largely because folks know, the bad guys know that we want and need this vaccine very quickly, and it's large money. And so, and with the speed of the necessity of it, I think they know if we lock all your systems up and you're unable to deliver it, store it, whatever the case may be, you're likely to pay us. So absolutely, we've seen those threats, and I think that's also rising in popularity among the attackers to use. I'm not trying to get any of your data. I just want to disrupt what you need to be doing with your data and your vaccines and your, channels, communication channels, so that I could potentially get money from you to give you that access back.
Now, Interpol has warned of organized crime participation. And I guess you could define organized crime in a number of different ways. Does that concern you at all? Do you think of that as being a factor here as well?
Do I think organized crime is probably the folks using the ransomware, right? Typically, right? They
Mm-hmm.
use a bunch of different methods, but it's typically for uh, not for financial gain, right? They want to
Yeah.
make money, and ransomware is one of the easiest ways to do that if it works, right? Because they're not looking to get out, they're not looking to get data, they just or resell it. They just want to lock up your system so that if you need access to it, they prevent that, so you'll pay them.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I'd say the organized crime around ransomware is definitely prevalent.
So what steps should we be taking now to ensure the security of the vaccine supply chain?
Yeah, I think it's looking at that actual supply chain and the technology used to support it. So, what are the different systems that we're using to communicate, but also the Internet of Things, IoT technologies used to monitor temperatures, monitor where the airplane or the truck is that's delivering these vaccines. Making sure those are as secure as possible. A lot of IoT devices don't have space to keep technologies on them to monitor them, but how do we keep them, segregated from other things that may be attacked and may have malware on them, et cetera? How do we look at emails and our communication channels to make sure they're as secure as they possibly can be? But I think IoT is a big one that often gets missed because it's thought of as a device that doesn't hold data, but it could be disrupted. It could be, locked up, and it may be giving you bad data. So you don't actually know where these vaccines are, or don't actually know if they're secure
Yeah.
because it looks okay, but you're not really getting the right data.
And an unsecured IoT device offers a window into an entire system,
Absolutely.
does it not?
It
So
potentially could, right?
yeah, ironic, I guess. I mean, it's a pretty obvious irony, but the fact that the very same technology that makes this possible to happen with efficiency is the same technology that threatens it if it's not overseen in the proper way. But are we talking about when there are shortfalls, when there are mistakes and breaches, and the fault can be laid at the door of the systems themselves? Is it the technology, or is it the people and the failure of people to use the technology properly
Right. I
that's
think,
at fault?
yeah, absolutely. We're still configuring these systems. It's still the people configuring these systems. And I don't
Mhm.
necessarily think it's malicious. I think it's mistake because, again, back to the speed and the scale of this, the mass scale, there are likely steps that you unintentionally bypass or don't configure correctly because you're trying to do it for speed and get a lot of things done. It can become monotonous. So you've got to double check and have different fail safes in place to make sure you're configuring this correctly, or that it is still set and or configured appropriately
Mhm.
as changes get implemented into your environment, as you need to be flexible, right? We're not going to do this deployment method now. We're going to move to this. We're going to shift to XYZ, or whatever the case may be, and that may change how you use technology. And so you need to take a look at, does that change how I need to secure that technology as well? And it often it's an afterthought, unfortunately, but I think it's just by mistake and by this pure speed of trying to get things implemented.
How educated have we become about the need for security when it involves things like the Internet of Things and the like? In the early days of IoT, it was pointed out that a lot of the breaches were the result of something as dumb as failing to change the factory password to something more, to something stronger. I would like to think that people know better now. Uh, are there mistakes that happen for reasons as simple as that? Are the breaches more sophisticated, or are we still looking at some very fundamental failures of human behavior here that causes it open to breaches?
It's a great question. Unfortunately, there's still quite a few fundamental errors, right?
Yeah.
That are being made. Maybe it's not a changed password, but there's also limitations. There are some devices where if you change the default password, it's no longer under warranty. Things like that
Seriously,
start to
really?
occur. Yeah, not a whole lot of them, but there's still that
Huh.
case in some of the more expensive ones. But in the smaller devices, not as much anymore. But it's also the know-how of setting those things up.
Hmm.
IoT typically comes with the ability to set it up quickly, plug and play, and so people aren't looking to get into the configuration of it. And that does still take potentially a skilled worker to do that. And they may be busy on a bunch of other different things. So that's why those things are still being missed at the
Yeah.
fundamental level.
It's frustrating because it feels like we're constantly dealing with the thing that just happened.
Right.
As opposed and that cyber thieves and hackers and the like always seem to be able to manage to stay one step ahead of us, that the
Right.
next threat that comes along is something different, and then we address that and try to fix it, and they're off doing something else. How do we keep pace with these cyber criminals, especially when for something as valuable as vaccines.
Yeah, the key is obviously protections, but really it's detection and response. Being able to identify, detect something malicious or potentially malicious or suspicious happening in these technologies, IoT or otherwise, and in the business process, and having someone that's knowledgeable to see it and say, that doesn't look right. Let me investigate further and respond as quickly as possible. That takes manpower, that takes humans, and that can be exhausting. That can also be artificial intelligence that you need to train. So, but I do think the key is in detection and response. How you deploy that is also tough because there's nuances to it, and a bunch of different things that we can do. And quite frankly, protections could take quite a while to be implemented and implemented properly. So put in the basic protections, but at least be able to detect and respond as quickly as possible. And that may mean have third parties help you in responding to those things or detecting some of those things as well.
So bottom line, it sounds like you're suggesting that the technology to protect these supply chains actually is here. It's simply a matter of deploying it properly and with enough care. Is that indeed the case?
I would say so, but also monitoring that deployment that is configured appropriately and protecting the systems and the processes, that you can detect any change in those or any abnormal behavior, so that then you can respond and say, I'm not sure what's going on, let's check that out. Maybe that's a false positive, or maybe it's something we need to go look after because it's being hit, it's being attacked, or it's been compromised.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's important to have this wake-up call. It's kind of sad to hear that people were asleep in the first place, but to the extent that they were, Stacy Scott of Kroll, you provided us with some very valuable information today on how to secure the vaccine supply chain going forward. Thanks for being with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Robert. Nice talking to you.